Bryan.
Hey.
How you doing?
Good.
Good.
Senior.
All right, this is the studio.
Welcome. Just built this summer, so brand new.
Sweet. That's cool.
We got roostering out in this little house.
This is fun because I don't know a lot about your history, so this is going to be, it's not going to be like fake where I already know it.
Right.
My history.
Okay. Tighten that up. Okay. I remember how to do this.
Finally getting to the point where you can do stuff like this again.
Yeah. Okay. Welcome to the Unvarnished podcast. I'm Ryan Brown, and this is Bryan Larsen. We've had an insane year of the pandemic, and I think you and I have been talking about doing this for, it feels like over a year.
It's probably been about that long.
Yeah. So everything hit. There's a number of artists I wanted to talk to in Utah. You being one of the first ones I wanted to talk to, and then of course everything sort of shut down, and so we haven't been able to do this. So it's exciting to get back to doing this podcast. The whole idea of the podcast really for me is to visit artist studios and have a visual aspect to these interviews. There are a lot of good podcasts out there where with great interviews, great artists that I love listening to, but I find myself craving that visual.
Right.
I would look into the artist studio, sort of a behind the scenes look into your working space, the creative space. So finally, we get to do this again, and I'm super happy that you've got the time to meet and talk about you.
My pleasure.
All right. So we haven't spent a ton of time together, and our paths have crossed here and there, and we've texted, we've talked on the phone. I've been to the studio before, only once before actually. Mm-hmm. But I don't know a lot about your history, your story, how you came to be an artist. So all of this, I'll be hearing for the first time at the same time as the listeners. So, who are you? Did you grow up in Utah?
What do you want to know? I did. I was born in Salt Lake. I grew up in Woods Cross, which for people that don't know, Utah it's just north of Salt Lake.
Yeah.
By West Bountiful. My parents were born and raised in Utah too, so my whole family's here and from here. Even as a little kid, I was always drawing.
Yeah.
It was pretty much what I did with my spare time. My mom was an elementary school teacher before I was born. And so she was really interested in, fostering kids' interests and allowing them to explore what it was that they were interested in. And she had quite a bit of artistic talent too. So I always had, pencils and crayons and more paper than I knew what to do with, and was never discouraged from anything like that, and got a lot of praise. I know all kids get praise from their parents, but it helps. Was it something? Did your parents have anything that they pushed you into? Did you have for me it was sports. It was my dad was big into sports, would coach me Little League and basketball, and so I felt a little bit more pressure to do sports, but art was always just the thing that was fun. Nobody cared if I did it, and so really the only thing I got was
encouragement and praise.
Right.
Even though, I wasn't doing anything praiseworthy. It was just a thing that was fun to do, where it was totally without the pressure that I felt in sports.
Right. And in some ways, maybe I don't know if it's a good or a bad thing, but my parents were never, I don't think they ever had any kind of an agenda for any of us. I have 5 brothers and sisters, and I don't think any of us felt pushed in any direction. My dad was a draftsman for an architectural firm and later for the church. And so I watched him do a lot of meticulous drawing. It was back when everything was hand done.
Yeah.
And he was a huge Frank Lloyd Wright fan. And
yeah.
so, every kid looks up to their dad a little bit. And I always thought that was pretty neat.
Yeah.
But no, I was never, they were more interested, I think, in if you showed an interest in something, trying to find a way within their means to allow you to pursue it. So if any of us had been interested in a sport, I think they would have supported that.
Yeah.
But I was always just kind of a geeky, kid. I was not interested in sports when I was a kid. So I don't know. I don't remember. I was a space cadet then too. I don't know how accurate my memory is, but I never remember them even questioning whether or not it's something you could do for a living. They were just supportive of my interest in it.
Pure support.
Which is great.
Yeah. I talk to a lot of high school students. We do the portfolio review at the Springville Museum every year. And so I get an opportunity to talk to a lot of juniors and seniors. And of course, now my kids are kind of getting to that age as well. I've got my second kid's graduating high school. And, what I've always tried to help them do is find a way to live a life of passion, or to try and find what it is that you really love, and then not necessarily always try to find a way to monetize that, but find a way to live in such a manner that is possible to follow as much as you possibly can, right? Whatever your way of paying your bills,
right?
Whatever that is, at least it will open up the door for you to live this passion, whether that's be, hiking or traveling or, going around and eating lots of yummy food, or it doesn't really matter, but how do you maximize that passion and build upon it and live a life that allows for that, instead of the drudgery of a cubicle living where you get to buy stuff, but you don't get to enjoy it because you're never home. And, that's really important. So it sounds like what your parents kind of did for you. Just, what do you want? And just total support of that.
They had their hands full with 6 of us too. And, I was never the kind of a kid that was looking ahead at all.
Yeah.
And so because of that, I think I did pretty much everything the hardest way possible. I didn't have even, at the end of my senior year, I didn't know for sure.
Yeah.
I hadn't thought about college. And I knew that I loved to draw, but I had never seriously considered whether or not that was something you could do for a living. I just hadn't even considered it.
Yeah.
And I was really fortunate to have 2 teachers my senior year that convinced me to enter the Sterling Scholar program, which is, looking back on it, a really fortuitous thing, because I ended up getting a 2-year scholarship to Utah State.
Okay.
And I don't know that I would have pursued college, at least not in art, if it hadn't been for that. I honestly don't know what I would have done because I hadn't thought about it. But I ended up going there at a really good time. I have an uncle named Mark Beener, who's a absolutely fantastic children's book illustrator.
Yeah.
And when I ended up getting the scholarship, and I had a choice of a couple of different universities, the University of Utah or Utah State, I got to meet the directors of the different programs, and I ended up meeting Glenn Edwards, who at the time was running the illustration program.
Right.
My uncle studied
Who's
with
kind
him.
of the main guy that made Utah State viable.
Right. I mean, and he's from the that older generation of illustrators back when illustrating by hand was like I think almost the golden age of illustration.
Yeah, absolutely.
And had just an incredible amount of knowledge about the industry, and was incredibly talented himself. And I knew who he was because my uncle had talked about him, and that kind of seemed like a no-brainer to me. I didn't think at the time that it was possible to make a living just painting paintings.
Yeah.
I didn't know anybody who did that. I didn't even know you could study painting.
What year was this?
I graduated from high school in 1993, so this would have been
early on. I mean, this is probably before Water Street existed, I would imagine. I think Florence Academy started to come around to, mid to later 90s. I mean, there was very little available.
Yeah, and the internet was brand new. It's not like there was a way to find out that there was another program. So I had 2 years there in the illustration program. It was the first time I had ever done, drawing from a model. Or even had anyone realistically critique my work. I think a lot of artists probably have had this experience where you are used to being a big fish in a little pool. You're the kid that knows how to draw. Oh, he's the best artist in our elementary school. Out of 50 kids in the middle of nowhere. And it was interesting to get to a university where there were other talented people and have a professor who knew what he was talking about, that could give you some actual direction. And for the longest time, I thought I was going to illustrate children's books. It sounded ideal. Like, what a great way to create art that also can be, fanciful and imaginative, but still realistic, as you want it to be, and tell a cool story. And
you were probably exposed at the same time to N.C. Wyeth and Howard Pyle and Rockwell, Leyendecker, Dean Cornwell. I mean, all
Maxfield Parrish. I absolutely loved his stuff.
And it opens up a world of possibilities. I mean, with all those various styles and what they were doing with the book illustrations and how they're bringing these stories to this visual life. Because I studied illustration as well, and it's just like there's magic.
Right. Growing up in the 80s and 90s, there were only 3 or 4 artists that you ever heard about. If it wasn't Michelangelo, Leonardo da Vinci, maybe Raphael, Van Gogh, that was it. That was all
Picasso,
there was, right? Well, I've never been a fan of the abstract stuff. Even as a kid, but anyway, I once that scholarship was up, I was not a super responsible student. I didn't find a way to renew it, and I ended up thinking I'll just take a year off and earn some money. Moved back home, got a job building cabinets. My dad tinkered in the garage with wood building, so I thought I knew something about that, and ended up getting. I hesitate to say stuck, but it kind of was that way. I learned a lot that way too, and developed a lot of work ethic, and really gained an appreciation for how lucky I am now to not be doing physical labor anymore. But I also met some interesting people who were really took that craft seriously and learned another side of craftsmanship. But I ended up doing that for more than a decade. I got married, and we sort of had a deal that we would take turns. I would work while she went to school, and then once she graduated, I would go back. So we did that. I built cabinets while my wife finished her degree. And then when it was my turn to go back, at this point, I think Glenn Edwards had passed away at this point. While I was at Utah State, I made really great friends with a fellow artist named Damon Denny's, who he and I, he introduced me to the Pre-Raphaelites, actually, and we got really into this idea of we're completely oblivious to the fact that this same kind of renaissance is taking place at all the ateliers everywhere else, and we decide we're going to try and teach ourselves to paint, realistically, and take it seriously, like these guys did, and be meticulous and paint detail, and but also paint scenes that were important to us, like the Pre-Raphaelites did. We didn't know anyone that was doing anything like that. But I had also sort of decided that I also needed to make a living, and I didn't really want to do children's books at that point, and I thought I'll do something else for a living, and I'll just paint in my free time, and that way I can paint what I want and
without the pressures of trying to monetize it.
Right. I had no idea if that was even a thing that could be done. So I went back to school in mechanical engineering, and I was painting in my free time and going to the engineering program at the University of Utah. And about 2 years in to the program, I'd been painting in my free time, and I had my friend Damon had found this little gallery in Burlingame, California that was just starting. Didn't care that neither one of us had any formal art training.
Yeah.
And I had just finished this big painting of a boy and his dad watching a Saturn V launch. And they said I could send it to him, which was pretty cool.
Yeah.
Damon sent this big, beautiful painting that my wife had modeled for also. And I don't think either of us really expected anything to happen, but Damon's painting sold in about a week, and it just blew our minds. I mean, it was a life-changing moment, I think, for both of us, because it not only did it sell, but it sold for, and this is me having no concept at all of what you could sell paintings for, you know. It sold for enough money that all of a sudden there was this little spark of an idea that maybe this is something that can actually, you know, you're not going to get rich, but you might not have to build cabinets. You could actually paint paintings, and people might buy them. Yeah. And this was not a painting that he had just painted what he wanted, and someone else had connected with that. And it was really amazing. And what was more amazing was a couple of months after that, the one that I sent sold.
Yeah.
And at that point, my wife and I sat down and had a pretty serious discussion.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, look, I can either finish this engineering program, which I loved. I was fascinated by it, and I was good at it. And it was kind of a guaranteed, this is a preset way to go out into the world and make a living.
Pretty solid career choice.
Right. Or we can take this ridiculous chance and see what happens. And now I'm really glad that she was supportive enough of that. But we decided I'm going to drop out of the engineering program and just try and paint full time and send paintings and see what happened. And
what year was that?
Let's see. I sent that painting in 1998.
Okay.
I believe. I'd have to go back and check. But,
so you're still pretty young at that point.
Right. I was really young.
Yeah. So
and it took a while. I mean, there were years where I went back and worked at the cabinet shop over and over. Had a boss that was really indulgent of that. He would let me leave and paint, and when I ran out of money, he'd let me come back, which is wild.
Yeah.
But I kind of felt like an airplane taking off under low power, where I'd be in the air for a while and think this is it, and then be like, no, I'm done, and back. But eventually, I feel like I just sort of stumbled into a weird little niche where I started to have a few collectors that liked what I was doing. Was really fortunate that the gallery director and the owner of this little gallery, Quint Cordair Fine Art is the name of the gallery, were good at finding people that liked what I wanted to paint. I never felt like I had to paint something specifically in order to sell. I was able to paint things that I was interested in.
Yeah.
And from then on, it's been, I've never looked back after that, after things really kind of got comfortable.
Yeah.
There've been scary years for sure, but I've never thought, man, it's time to pack this in and go finish that engineering degree or anything like that. So.
I mean, it's pretty amazing that it happened that quickly, and I probably didn't feel quick, like it was happening quickly, but so quickly after high school and
this would have been quite a while after high school when things, but
showing, you had the 2 years of artistic training and then getting picked up in 1998. I mean, geez, it feels like I don't even know how long out of high school it was for me. I guess almost 10 years before I got my first gallery. But yeah, I mean, it's such a, hopefully, a lot of people will be inspired by that, because I think everyone has to come to that decision and come to that place of true fear of can I do this? Is it possible? Do I want to take that risk? I mean, it is such a massive risk to give up something that is guaranteed with this paycheck, something if I go do this and spend my time here, I can pay my bills, and it feels very self-indulgent. I don't know if that was true for you, but for me, it always felt like, am I being too selfish here in wanting to pursue this? Am I putting my family in a worse position because I'm too selfish to go do something responsible? There was a lot of fear and feelings like that I think probably a lot of people experience.
That's interesting.
But seeing people do it and seeing them find success through it, I think is inspiring in that it feels possible. I mean, my experience was when I was at BYU, I saw a Burton Silverman show. Yeah. And that was the first time I ever saw somebody painting whatever they wanted and making me care about it. And I thought, well, I didn't even know. So I could just paint what I think is pretty or beautiful or interesting. And if I could pull that same sort of emotion out of somebody else, man, because it was so powerful for me when I saw his show, and it's sort of life changing in a similar way to when you painted whatever you wanted and it actually sold. It's like, wow, there's people out there that are interested in the same things I'm interested in, and I can connect with that sort of passion. And you've done it. You've gone a direction that's incredibly unique. I mean, I don't really know very many people that are doing subject matters like you're doing. I can't believe Elon Musk hasn't hired you as the official SpaceX painter. He should. We'll tag him in this. Right on. He's a big fan of the podcast.
Excellent. He should be.
So what got you into that? I'm interested in a number of things with how you work, but let's start with subject matter. What got you into, because you don't just paint like space or rocket ships, or you've done some like Prometheus. Is that right?
Yeah. It's taken me a long time.
Invented land. I mean, a lot of it's invented, right?
A lot, especially the landscape stuff.
But still incredibly complex and richly populated with information. And so, how did you? I mean, I'm asking a number of questions, but how did you get to a point where you felt confident doing that? How did you get to a point where you? How did you gather the information where you could do it so effectively? And in terms of subject matter, what got you interested in those sorts of things?
Well, there are a couple of things that happened. I've always been a space nerd, I guess, but for a long time, I didn't think that was something that would make interesting paintings, for one thing. Yeah. And, I was enormously influenced by Maxfield Parrish and the Pre-Raphaelites, and that was kind of where my subject matter was coming from too. I spent a lot of time doing paintings that felt similar to that. But the first painting I ever sold was of a Saturn V launch, and some of my oldest drawings that my mom still has are drawings of the space shuttle and things like that. So I've always liked that stuff. But so I think for everybody, for every artist, everyone takes kind of their own weird way to stumble into what it is that they eventually feel like works for them and allows them to express themselves or whatever it is that they're trying to say. And a couple of things happened. The big Prometheus painting that you're talking about was a commission, but it happened in an interesting way because my friend Damon and I both always felt really ambitious about tackling big, complicated subjects. We fantasized about someday running a school where we would actually have enough students that we could design these big, giant paintings and only paint the faces and have the students paint all the other stuff.
So, sort of Alphonse Mucha, grandiose.
Right, but we also both, and I especially, realized that I did not have the technical ability to pull it off. And I I had the idea for this Icarus painting. I said Prometheus earlier, but the Icarus painting's the one I'm thinking of. 10 years before I painted it, and I knew for a fact that I wouldn't be able to pull it off. I wanted to have Icarus land instead of having the horrible ending that the original story has. And I recognized that narrative to the Greeks was a very important one.
Right.
You listen to your elders if you're going off to war, or you die. It was a fundamental thing. But I kind of recognized that people have always connected with that image of Prometheus, not because he dies, but because it's sort of this expression of freedom, of beating the gods, of finding a way to solve a problem, and using your own engineering and ingenuity, but I also thought to myself, this is a painting that has to be big. And even early in my art career, when I was selling paintings, there was no way that I could afford to spend 6 months or a year working on one painting and then maybe not sell it.
Yeah.
So I kind of had backburnered it. And eventually the gallery director approached me, and they had a client that was interested in commissioning some paintings, and did I have any ideas?
Yeah.
And I said, yeah, I do. I've got this
brilliant
idea
is that?
that's been on the back burner forever. And so
that's the best thing ever.
I painted a study of it,
Yeah.
how I wanted to do it. That I modeled for half the parts, and had my kids model for half the parts, and my wife modeled for one of them. And I sent this study, and he went for it. And I was absolutely blown away to have a chance to paint this thing.
Yeah.
But in order to get to the point where I felt comfortable painting that, I mean, it was, I did have one summer, this was the summer of 2008, that I was able to save up some money, and I went and I did the summer drawing intensive at the Grand Central Academy. And as part of that, I also did a figure painting seminar that was 2 weeks long.
Right.
Doug Flint taught that one. And it was the first time I'd ever seen real art instruction. I mean, it really, I didn't know what to expect.
Unbelievable.
I showed up with my, with the stuff that was on their materials list.
Right.
And I remember really knowing that I was in the deep end when I got there. And I'd gone to the University of Utah's brown bag sketch class, where the short pose is 30 seconds and the long pose is half an hour.
Right.
And I walk in, and they're like, "Okay, we're going to warm up with a short pose." And I'm ready. And they're like, "The short pose is 8 hours," and the long pose was the entire, 6 weeks of the program. And Doug Flint was the first person who ever talked about actually techniques for controlling color and thinking about chroma and how to apply paint, things that I had only been able to cobble together from reading other artists' accounts and just messing with things and seeing what worked. And I did a study for that Icarus painting. That was the first thing I painted when I got back from that. In fact, one of the models at the GCA snuck into the studio with me after hours and modeled for it. I took a bunch of photos, but I think that 6 weeks was ridiculously useful to me because I had spent 10 years beating my head against all these problems. But anyway,
well, having the time, I mean, that's, I think a lot of people are, that may have heard of, academic study or looking at university study versus academic study. I actually just recorded a video to put on our school's website, kind of trying to describe the differences. And that's one of the fundamental differences is in an academic setting, you have not just vocabulary thrown at you and a ton of different various ideas about art or technique or whatever, but you actually have time to digest and develop and at your own pace really internalize and own that information. At the university, it seems more like here's an exposure to it, but you don't leave with, learning is ownership of a new skill or ownership of new knowledge that you didn't have before, not just an awareness that it's there. And I think that's what the academy system really allows for is the time to gain ownership of that new skill or that new piece of knowledge. And
I imagine that would really be true.
Yeah.
And the other thing that I found really amazingly useful was having instructors around that could look at what you were working on, be able to identify where it is that you're struggling, not just kind of guess, but really know.
Yeah.
And be able to give you useful feedback on that.
Right.
I mean, I was so used to having art instructors quote just whatever they had heard from their art instructor.
Right.
Oh, add a complementary color, turn it upside down. Maybe, you know what I mean? Just whatever the random thing is, that they had heard, but they didn't really, through no fault of their own, they didn't have a real understanding of it enough to be able to say, well, here's what's happening. The way that the form is turning here, you've got the terminator in the wrong place. Some way to really analyze what it is that is going wrong for you and point you in the right direction. And that was incredibly valuable. Yeah.
The clarity of explanation and the sort of absolute quality of being able to, like you said, pinpoint what's wrong or inconsistent and exactly how to fix it. It was pivotal for me as well.
Right.
And shocking that I hadn't experienced it before. Right. And when I came back to Utah and started teaching it, I was just so excited to pass this on because it was like the academy had given me this box of flashlights, and I was coming home to this vast darkness of chaotic information, and I just wanted to hand out these flashlights and be like, here, it's like, did you feel like that? Like when Douglas Flint would come up, and it was just like he shined the light on something that just was so obscure before, and his moment he says it, and the moment he points it out, it's like, there it is.
There were a number of aha. I mean, so many aha moments in that, not just from Doug, but from Cammie Davis was one of the drawing instructors. All through it. And again, I think part of that was just that I had already done, I wasn't in there green.
Absolutely.
I had already been painting professionally for 10 years at that point.
So this was just kind of putting sandpaper to the edges and really refining the knowledge you'd already
and really pointing out things that I had been doing wrong on a very deep level, that required kind of a rethinking of everything. But I came back from that feeling like now I can really tackle some more interesting ideas and concepts. And
that
even then, it was
confidence
just kind of
with knowing, like you were talking about when they pointed out, like it's so clear to you what needs to happen or how that needs to change. That kind of clarity brings with it that kind of confidence. I mean, you come home and you're just ready to like explode onto all these ideas.
Absolutely. And you're so anxious to try out these skills and figure out how to use them.
Right.
And, it was nice to know that there were so many other people trying to solve these same problems and that were serious about it,
Can I I'm really sorry.
Oh, no,
because I want this to be about you, but
you go right ahead.
And I'm sorry to all the viewers, but if I could indulge myself, I've had this thought in the last few weeks. Some things have really kind of smacked me in the face as I direct my own school, and I try to refine the curriculum to best serve the students. Because this idea that you're talking about is, I think, so incredibly pivotal for academic students. I kind of brought it up as I was setting this up and as we were talking earlier. But it's the idea that a lot of students go to the academies pretty naive, pretty ignorant of the overall art world. Imagine yourself in 1996, 97, not knowing a lot about the art world, not knowing a lot about the outlets, not knowing a lot about living artists or historical artists, a lot of people come at it very green. And when they go to the academies, one of the things that's very concerning to me is that the academies, in some cases, deliberately avoid the discussions about design, about narrative, about composition, about all of the things that are like post-graduation application of all the skills that you're developing. Why am I developing the skills? Why do I want to learn how to term form? Why do I want to be, have a good understanding of anatomy or, space and value and color harmonies. There's no discussion about the post-graduation application, which is aesthetic and design and composition and narrative. What do I want to say with it? And because that conversation doesn't exist, now that I have 18 years of looking back at the effects of the academic system, I can see that the long-term effects of that are that the majority of people that graduate those systems fall off a massive cliff after graduation because they haven't developed their ideas. They haven't thought about what they want to do. They haven't been working on their own outside of class, which in some cases is discouraged. And all of those skills they've ignored the development of that. And those are the professional skills. They develop the student skills, but they haven't developed the professional, almost entrepreneurship type self-managing and self-governing skills. And so a lot of people end up doing very refined student studies, the shadow box still lifes, the portraiture for long time after graduation, without venturing into broader narratives, broader subject matters. And that's very concerning to me because it seems very confining in terms of what the academies are opening, the world that the academies are opening to the students. And I almost feel like we're on this precipice of the academies painting themselves out of relevance. Because if the only thing you have to say is, look how well I render, or look at my skill set, it's impressive, but we now have like 20 years of seeing it, and it's less and less impressive. And so the thing that you're talking about that's so interesting to me is, yes, you went and got some of this academic experience that really exploded you, but you went having already had years of thinking about what you want to do professionally. You came thinking, so when you're turning the form, when they're talking about, correcting your proportion, or they're talking about how to define volume a little bit better, how to think conceptually about the light falling on the surface, you're already thinking about how you're going to apply that to all these ideas later. And it's not this self-contained information that you, in your head only applies to this one exercise of portraiture or figure. You're already thinking like,
it's a tool that I can use to achieve it.
Absolutely. It's it's something in the service of something much bigger.
Right.
And that's where I think the academies are kind of missing the point, is they're not talking about in the service of something much bigger. And what is that much bigger? We're not going to feed that to you, but we want to help you at least think about it and develop your own vision so that when you graduate, you don't fall off this cliff because you've never considered it before.
Right.
And so that to me is probably one of the main factors in whether or not someone's going to be a professional or not, right? If you're painting and you're coming up with ideas and you're, being creative in your thoughts, and you're actually painting and fighting through all these problems that painting presents us, the academy can be a great source for economizing the time it takes to get much better at it.
Well, and it might be one of the only places that you can find someone who knows how to teach you those skills.
Right, with absolute clarity.
Yeah.
But my argument is, if you're not already doing that, if you're not thinking creatively and you're not motivated by a deeper creative force, you're not painting on your own, the academy's not going to do anything but help you get good at drawing so that you can go work at Costco.
Well,
do you know what I'm saying?
I understand exactly what you're saying. And it's interesting because, I don't know, from my approach, that is what I would have wanted from the academy.
Yeah.
Because I was already trying to work on the other stuff. And what I wanted was a place where I could go and say, look, I want to be able to do a painting like this, but I have no idea how to do it, the technical side of it, and have them be able to tell me. And that's exactly what it seemed like I got from my brief exposure there. But having never been inside that system, I maybe in a weird way, I'm glad that I took the weird, difficult approach that I did, just because I don't know. I'd never felt like, it always seemed obvious to me that that's why you would want to learn how to draw and paint better, was so that you could more accurately do what it was you were trying to do beforehand.
Yeah, I mean, I tell students when they come in, from the very first day, even just prospective students, when we go through this interview process, answering their questions and finding out more about their goals, I tell them, I want you to feel like the academy is in the way. I want you to come daily almost a little bit annoyed that you have to be here, because, what you really want to do is paint. You really want to follow your own ideas, but that this study is going to help you do it more effectively, that it's going to help you do it at a higher level, and it's going to clarify your vision. It's going to, skill-wise, help you do it more efficiently and with a far greater quality. But what you really, really want, what you really, really should want from day one, is to be making your own work. I always felt that, and so I thought it was normal. But I realized, after now having the academy for 13 years, it's not. The majority of students come in, and I think part of it is just a youth and naivete and inexperience. But there's no way to overcome inexperience without experience. And the thing that they're gaining experience in the school is just skill. But the thing, if they don't go home and work on it, if they don't go home and try to come up with ideas, the experience that they're avoiding getting is the creative.
Right.
And that's where they end up failing post-graduation. And so I almost feel like I'm doing a disservice to students if all I'm doing is helping them get good at academic nude drawing, because who cares? Really, who cares? Who are you and what's important to you? And that's what I want to see. And doing it well is important, but doing it is even more important to me. Do you know what I'm saying?
I do. I think it might be, I don't know if it is or not, but it might be unpopular to draw too many parallels between the arts and other disciplines. But to me, I see a lot of them, and maybe some of that is the time that I spent in the engineering department. But to me, it feels just like engineering, in that when you go to the university, you're learning how to solve engineering problems, approaches that can be taken, to solve problems. But they don't tell you what problems need to be solved. Yeah. And they don't tell you that what they also don't tell you is that the people that really are going to stand out. Yeah. Not just by making a living, but I did have a professor one time say 90% of you will spend all of your time bending a bolt back and forth to figure out how long it takes to break it. Yeah. And I guess the difference between the engineering program and the arts is that there is no job for artists that all they are qualified to do is bend a bolt back and forth until they can break it.
Right. Basically, write out the equations.
Right. You don't get to go work for a firm where someone else has this big complicated problem that they need solved in a creative way. Yeah. And it is a very creative field, much like art is. Right. In the arts, you are in charge of that. You, even if you have a commission, and I haven't done a ton of commissions, but I've done enough to know that most of the time, the client doesn't really know what they want. Yeah. Sure. They have a feel for what it is that they want. Usually it's just the most abstract idea. Yeah. It really is your job not only to come up with the solution to the problem, but you have to come up with the problem in the first place. Yeah. You have to say, what is a way to say this thing? How can I come up with a composition that does it? And unless you're doing, portraiture or things like that, which there absolutely is a place for. Sure. But it's a different kind.
It's very straightforward.
Of problem solving.
Yeah. It's not as complex, and you've approached that within the curriculum. So it's something that you're confident with. which is why I think a lot of people stick with it, because it's comfortable. I feel like I can approach this confidently.
And I feel like there are artists that transcend this, in that they can do a painting of a subject that would otherwise be uninspiring.
Right.
But because of whatever, and this is, I think, a pretty rare thing. It's not just a matter of having skill, but there are artists that are able to transcend that and find a way to transform something ordinary into something extraordinary.
Yeah, sure.
But again, I don't think that is something that you can teach easily.
Right.
And it's certainly not something that you can plan on hanging your career on if you're going to go into the arts.
Yeah. It's interesting that you talk about it in terms of engineering, because the thing that made me really, or the thing that slapped me in the face with this idea initially was I was reading the book Peak, Secrets to the New Science of Expertise, which is it's a great book on human development or developing expertise in any sort of field, whether it's memorizing numbers or music or drawing or whatever it is. That there is a science behind human development towards expertise in any given field. And one of the things that they talked about was teaching physics, and how in a program they did a study where they found that you could teach an undergraduate, first year physics student to solve problems mechanically in the same way, to do the equations basically at the same level as a postdoctorate.
Sure.
These skills were basic and fundamental. But what they were learning was that through the way that most programs were teaching physics, they were giving them the skills to solve equations, but they weren't teaching them how to be physicists. In the sense, like you're talking about, seeing a problem or inventing a problem that you then have to come up with a creative solution for. It's a way of creative thinking that was void in the physics programs, and so they altered it. They altered the way of testing and the way of presenting information in a way that kind of put students in a position to come up with the problems and find solutions for them, in the same way that you have to come up with a painting idea and then find a way to compose it and paint it. And it smacked me in the face that that's exactly what the academies are doing. They are teaching equations, how to solve problems through simple equations, and the students are typically coming out very good at that one thing, but they have absolutely no experience in the creative aspect of presenting themselves with their own problems and coming up with solutions. And so that's what made me think, okay, there's a serious problem with the way I'm approaching the preparation of students. And this is why so many students go through the program, get really good at drawing, and then 5 years later aren't working and making a living off their art. They're falling off this cliff because they're totally unprepared creatively. And so how do we teach them to be professional? What is it that we can do to teach them to be professional? And I think, this is why I'm so excited to talk to you, because I think you did it intrinsically. You were motivated by that deeper purpose of creating art. You're motivated by a personal vision, personal interest, the things that you loved, the visuals when you got exposed to the pre-Raphaelites or Maxfield Parrish. There was art to that was motivating.
Right.
And then you kind of brought the craft into it over years of kind of self-teaching, and then this program at the GCA. The craft was supplemental. And in the academies, I feel like the craft is the art, and that's the thing I would love to change the dynamic if possible. So yeah, I think you're a brilliant example of that. So okay, let's get back to you. Sorry for my academic tangent.
This is something that I think about a lot, and I think maybe we're approaching it from an interesting direction, because I think maybe this isn't something that is unique to just trying to teach drawing and painting, but it's probably common to just about any creative discipline.
Yeah.
Because the people that really are creative can find a way to solve a problem without any expertise, but
Yeah.
they do it by they identify something that they want to do, and then they are willing to do whatever it takes to
Yeah,
find a way
absolutely.
to do it, and they're willing to take whatever skills they do have and find a way to apply them.
Right.
And a lot of times, it's even outside of the arts.
You
I
probably
can think
experienced
of-
that with cabinetry and any of
Sure,
those other things.
sure.
Right?
And I can think of examples that I won't go into, but of people who have ended up being really interesting and amazing engineers, because even though they had no formal training, but it's because they were willing to do things like, try and do something that everyone else said was impossible.
Yeah.
Find a way to solve it. And they've probably ended up having to go to the library and teach themselves
Yeah.
differential equations or whatever it is along the way. But for the same reason, they realized they needed this tool.
Yeah.
It was, instead of saying, oh, I have this tool, what can I do with it?
Yeah.
And I think maybe that's exactly what you're talking about. If you train a bunch of people to say how to do a bunch of specific things, it's like giving them a giant bag of tools,
Right.
and then turning them out saying, all right, here are your tools, go do something with
Yeah.
them, instead of saying, maybe as an example, here is a range of real world problems
Yeah.
that we don't know how to solve yet.
Yeah.
Here's a pile of tools and they do these things. Can you think of any way that you might use
Yeah.
these tools to solve these problems?
Right. Right.
I don't know how you would you incorporate that into the arts, into teaching, but I think it
Yeah.
would be a really interesting way to start, especially if, and I understand where you're coming from. You probably feel a lot of responsibility toward your students to have them graduate not just with skills,
Yeah.
but prepared to go out and find a way to survive in the
Yeah.
in the real world. The last thing you want to do is
do what they want to do.
Right.
Have this self-motivation and self-governance to say exactly what you're saying. This is what I want to do.
Mm-hmm.
This is a message I want to share. This is an idea that I want to pursue. I'm not really sure how to do it. But if you never think about it while, I mean, if you're thinking about that all the while, like you were before you went to this program at the GCA, when you're turning that form in an academic nude, you're thinking about Icarus. You're thinking about how this would apply to these paintings that you already want to do. You're creatively problem solving as you develop the skills. And I think that's, I'm trying to figure out how do I incorporate certain elements into the program that would kind of put them in a position to be constantly thinking about, how do I want to apply this? What are my own things? What are the projects I want to give myself where this skill would be useful, instead of just skill, right? Because I just don't care if you can do an academic nude. I've seen amazing academic nudes, and I'll always like, seeing great drawing, but it's not as impressive anymore. I mean, I know that you can learn to do that, but I want to see who you are. When I look at your work, there's such a unique personal vision to it, and that's inspiring. When I saw Bert Silverman's work, of course I responded to the skill level. He's a brilliant painter, but what I really responded to was what he responded to. It was his vision. It was what he found beautiful.
And I think this is something that artists lose sight of. And again, I'm talking completely just from my own experience. It's not like I even know that many contemporary artists, but I know that this has been true for myself in the past, where when you are drawing and painting all the time, you become very aware of what your shortcomings are.
Yeah.
And of what's difficult. And it doesn't matter how many people you have around you telling you, that's so good. It looks just like a photograph.
Right.
It doesn't matter. You know what the shortfalls are. And when you see another artist's work that has solved those problems or has a command of them, first time I saw Al Matadim's Marble, I was absolutely blown away.
We'll come back.
Okay.
But the same thing with when I first saw, I don't remember the title of it. Oh, it's The Order of Elise by Jean Everett Millais. Are you familiar with that painting?
I don't know.
He's
I mean, I know the painter. I don't know exactly that.
Two paintings that he did, the Order of Elise and the Huguenot, were really amazing to me from a compositional standpoint, because all of a sudden I saw someone take a very simple composition and say something incredible with it just by the thing that he did well was facial expression and body language and things that you can hack your way through a lot of narrative without any skill. But there are certain things, especially if you want to talk about human emotions or serious issues, that if you can't accurately portray a facial expression or a gesture, especially if it requires any kind of subtlety, you're never going to get there. And that's where the kind of academy training, that's where it comes in. If
helps
you
you kind of get over that hump and refine that skill.
Right.
Yeah. But you have to know what emotion you want to portray in order to apply that, right? Otherwise, you have, it can be a very robotic way of portraying it. It makes me think of like Denzel Washington in the movie Glory. Have you seen that? I'm not familiar with it. It's about the first black regiment in the Civil War, but there's a moment where he gets caught. They say he's running away, but he's really just trying to find shoes because his feet are bloody and they're still marching every day and whatever. He gets caught, and Matthew Broderick, whips him in front of the whole regiment, and there's the music and this whole. I mean, film is so powerful because it combines the music, the acting, the cinematography, the lighting. I mean, but the moment of acting is very much like what you're talking about in the paintings, in the Millais paintings, in the Alma-Tadema paintings, where he's being whipped and the music kind of comes up and just one tear falls. And it's just like heart-wrenching. But there's paintings that have that. There's John Brown descending the stairs where he's on his way to trial or execution. There's a painting that I've paintings don't typically make me emotional, but there's one painting in the d'Orsay that I saw the last time I was in Paris. It's called Visiting Day. It's by Jean-Geoffrey de Gio, and it's a father. He's kind of bent over, wringing his hat, and his sickly son, who's kind of painted in this gray tone, is kind of comatose on the bed next to him, and then the bed right behind that are two brothers embracing. And being a parent, it's just the helplessness on the father's face, the slumping of the shoulders. There's so much.
You identified with something in that painting.
And the only
really
reason is because of how brilliantly it was executed. There was, it's not like it was super tightly rendered and there's all this other bullcrap. This is what I was saying. Yeah. It wasn't some super technical level of expertise that conveyed it. And what I was saying was, I think this is what a lot of artists forget while they're down in the weeds, trying to figure out when they look around, when you ask other artists what their favorite paintings are, a lot of times they'll be paintings where the artist has accomplished something that they themselves struggle with. Sure. And it's really easy to lose track of the overall goal of your painting when you are down in the weeds like that. And it's easy to forget that the people that are going to be looking at your paintings, hopefully, if you're lucky, if your art gets out in the world, the people that are going to be looking at your paintings, most of them are not going to be classically trained artists. Right. They're not going to be checking to see how perfectly things are done or whatever else, but they will be connecting to your overall narrative, the things that you've decided were important. Yeah. But even though they don't recognize those skills, and there have been how many famous artists through the centuries that are able to evoke emotion. The one that immediately comes to mind that everybody is in love with is Van Gogh. Yeah. No one's going to claim that he was a technical master. Right. But he was able to capture, especially, Starry Night's the most obvious example for me, some amount of wonder at the natural world that people connect with. Yeah. And it's his response to it.
If he had painted in that style but not captured that sense of wonder, no one would care.
Yeah, if he did it artificially, because his gallery said, "Hey, somebody liked that,
sure,
and they want more of it." Instead, it's the thing that's so beautiful about Van Gogh, and I'm not a huge Van Gogh fan, but what I love most about Van Gogh is his passion and purity and a love of it is so absolutely clear. It just, in the face of never selling, in the face of rejection from the Academy, in the face of so much personal torture, there's this thing that he has to do, this thing that he lives to do, that's what people respond to. And that's what I'm begging students to concentrate on is tell me who you are. I want you to think about that for you so that these skills actually make sense to develop.
Right. And for me, what that takes is to get out of that mindset where I'm always just thinking about the technique. What it really takes is to try and remember what it is that made me love paintings in the first place.
Right.
What paintings do I love not just because of their technical mastery, but and maybe it's not even a painting.
Yeah.
Maybe it's a scene from a movie. One of the pivotal ones when I was kind of moving toward the sort of stuff that I'm doing now, was a movie, was Gattaca.
Yeah.
The scene where he's, as a kid, he's sitting with that little, planetary orrery.
Yeah.
That scene was just, I emotionally connected with that scene. Something about him wanting to explore, wanting to find out the unknown, wanting to become something,
the imagination,
totally
and the
willing to do the work, right?
Yeah.
Right. And as I was trying to figure out things that I wanted to paint, and this is a pretty recent development, to be honest. I mean, really knowing stuff that I connected with, it took a long time for me to figure out. But it took a lot of thinking about what is it that I love about the artists that I love, and also what is it about everything about real life, about being a parent, about watching movies. What are the things that impact me, and why? And that's the really tricky part is why. And then, okay, how can I try and get that feeling from a scene? And after that is when you go, okay, well, now that I have this idea, now how do I
go about it?
Not just how do I paint it, but I think there's another thing that and maybe it is covered. I've never been through the atelier system, but how to get reference material, how to set up a scene, how to figure out, I know that I want to have, this person in this situation. So obviously I'm going to need a model, but beyond that, how far do you go?
Specific way. How am I going to dress them?
How
do I
paint
design the
background?
drapery? How do I
What's going to
fit
be back
that
there?
color
Does
into
it
the
matter?
background?
Yeah. Right.
And in that, I think that's the maturing of really knowing who you are and what motivates you, and that's what takes a long time. And it's no easy thing, and it doesn't come quickly. But ultimately it is, I think, the thing that guides the paintings, or should guide the paintings, because in the thick of it, like you're talking about, when you're in the weeds, you are concentrated on crafting this thing, as you're, making sure that the foot is drawn properly, and then getting the color and when you're spending months on a painting, or you have to think about that stuff, of course. I mean, it's part of the process, but you have to also be able to step away from the painting and look at it and say, is the way I'm describing it serving the fuller composition, serving this narrative? Am I painting it in a way that has this greater service to this overall concept? And that's how you pull yourself away from just every little thing having to be, perfectly rendered or whatever. And again, I think that takes a lot of maturation to get to that point where you can solve problems relative to the painting versus the reference. Whether you're painting from life or whether you're painting from photography or sketches or whatever, it's typical to trust that reference too much, to get into trying to make this look like that. And to pull away from that and be governed by, or start making your decisions based on what does the painting need to better fulfill this idea. It's a hard fought thing to come by.
It seems like something that would be really hard as an instructor.
Yeah.
I haven't had a lot of students. I have 2 or 3 individuals that I've worked with over the years.
Yeah.
And a lot of them are people that are trying to figure out how to do things like add more narrative,
Yeah.
or pull something off in a painting. And one thing that I'm always struggling with is that you always get to a point where when you're talking about the narrative and the creative aspect of it, it's one thing to tell somebody, this is how I mix this shade of green.
Sure.
You're not going to infiltrate their artistic process that way. You're just teaching them a skill.
Right.
It's an entirely different one when, and there's one student in particular that I'm thinking about, and she might know who she is, but where they are trying to put together a composition and they're trying to say a certain thing. And off the top of my head, I have 10 ways that I would solve that problem,
Sure.
or might approach it. And I can start listing those out, and she might think, oh, these are great ideas. But at the same time, that's me putting my own spin on
Right.
her idea. And the last thing that she wants, and she's aware of this and I'm aware of this, is for her to be painting my painting
Exactly.
instead of the one that she wants.
Yeah.
Because I don't know her deepest motivations.
Sure.
You know, I can, she can explain them to me, but I'm going to translate them until they make sense in my world.
Yeah.
And part of what makes art interesting is that you're seeing into that artist's world.
Right,
You don't
right.
want to be seeing into their instructor's world.
Into their version of their
Right.
instructor's world.
Right. So it gets to be it's been an interesting process of trying to figure out how to show her the method that I use to come up with ideas
Sure.
without saying,
Do it this way.
these are the ideas that I have
Yeah.
about how to do your painting. And I think
It's
that
sort of like-
becomes a much more difficult thing
Yeah.
than just teaching a
And
skill.
there is some anxiety as a teacher doing that, because you're not trying to make a version of you. You're not
Right,
saying, hey,
right.
I don't even want you to come work with me if that's what you want. I don't. But I sort of think like the movie Finding Forrester. Have you ever seen that, Sean Connery? There's a moment where he's sitting at a typewriter and says he doesn't have any ideas or whatever. Sean Connery gives him this. He says, just start copying this and then let it become yours.
Right.
Turns it in. They accuse him of plagiarizing, whatever. But he goes from those first few paragraphs to his own beautiful narrative, and that's what I hope as a teacher I can at least do is like you're saying, here's 10 ideas that I have on how I might solve it. Try them out and see if that at least gives you a springboard to find your own. Right. That's the hope.
Right.
But
I mean, ultimately, that part of creating art is up to the artist themselves.
Yeah.
But I do understand the problem that you're talking about getting so into the weeds that you forget the big picture.
Yeah.
And maybe, I don't know, maybe the solution is to, from the very beginning, set it up as, instead of, you're here to learn these skills, and from the very beginning say, what's an idea of something that you would paint,
Right.
that would be too hard.
Yeah.
And let's figure out why. Why is it too hard?
Yeah.
Well, I have
then we
no
can
idea
direct
where to
our
start. And then
skill development.
say,
Yeah.
and keep that in mind, throughout the program, and then at the end say, now here's your original idea. The problem is that people grow and change over over 4 years, but I feel like that's what happened to me in a lot of ways with things like that Daedalus painting. And maybe that would be instructive for other students to say, here's something I know I can't pull off and why. And then come back to it later when you have the skills and say,
Yeah.
now you can see how you would approach this and what have you learned in the meantime. And
Yeah.
it's a really interesting problem.
Yeah, it has me reconsidering everything I want to do with my life because I've put so much into trying to create a good curriculum, and I fear that I'm whether or not I'm being more of a service or a disservice.
As someone who would have loved to have had access to the kind of program that you offer, I can say that's definitely not true.
Yeah.
The last thing that I want to convey at this point is that I don't think that the sorts of skills that are being taught by ateliers aren't absolutely essential.
Yeah, right.
You know, maybe not essential, but in my opinion, and I know there are a billion people that disagree with me, there's no idea that can't be conveyed better through better execution.
Yeah.
I know that there is a school of art that's very holistic about it, and the less is more, and I can see where that's coming from. My own personal bias is that most often when I hear someone say that, it's because they've reached a wall where increased execution is going to reveal a flaw in what led up to it. I see this most of the time in figure drawing classes. If you go to the brown bag classes offered by, after hours at a university, and there'll be these same people that are there every week that they love to draw for 15 minutes and then stop.
Yeah.
And they have captured something very beautiful, but you can see that the reason that to them, they feel like, oh, I'll ruin it if I add more detail.
Yeah.
To me, I look at it and I say, well, the reason is that these proportions are wrong.
Yeah.
You don't notice it when it's loose like this.
Yeah.
But the minute you take it a step further, it reveals that there's a problem. Anyway, that's my bias. I think the more that you understand technically how to do something, the better you ought to be able to do it, as long as in the process of learning those technical skills, you don't forget why you wanted to learn them in the first place.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Which is the tricky part.
And that's the best message that I'm trying to convey a little bit more effectively to the students. So let's get back to your work.
Sure.
I want to talk about, do you want to describe this? I mean,
this is a commission.
Typically you work a little bit larger.
This is a commission and it's in progress. So I don't know how much I want to go
yeah.
into the guts of it before it's finished.
Yeah, yeah. Well, your process is interesting to me because you do a fully rendered grisaille every time, right? I mean,
I've been doing that for quite a while. Yeah.
Is that I do a painting? Maybe I do. I have a painting that maybe I have reference photos from a model outdoors or something, and there's like, out of 400 photos, there's like 12 I really want to paint.
Yeah.
But they're similar enough where if she's wearing the same dress or it's kind of in the same setting, and I do one and I'm like, I love all those others, but I'm kind of over it.
Right.
Do you never feel that? Like, I feel like if I worked this way, I'd paint it all in grisaille and be like, all right, I'm done. I've gone down that road, but you're actually painting it twice. What about that process is important to you? What do you feel like?
I started doing that for a couple of reasons. The main reason that I started doing it is that I was struggling a lot with paint transparency and with sinking in. I didn't even know what those things were called at the time, but I would go back and try and complete something that had already been painted, especially darker colors. Any painter knows that this is an issue you deal with, especially deep blacks, deep browns. When they dry to this matte finish where you can't see what you've blended, it was so frustrating. And then I would think I had it perfect, varnish the painting, and it would reveal that I had totally botched the matching. Everything was wrong.
Right.
There was that. And the other problem that I was having that caused me to initially think about doing an underpainting was having colors, especially darker colors, become more transparent as they dried.
Yep.
And you'd start to be able to see brush strokes, not in the good way, but in the way where the brush had pulled the paint a little thinner.
Yeah.
And as it had dried, it'd become more transparent. And all of a sudden, everything I thought had been smoothly blended
It starts to get a little
was all
blotchy.
choppy and
Yeah,
weird. And actually, Doug Flint, again, is one person. I mean, he's the person I knew.
Yeah.
And he was really generous with his time. I got in touch with him online and described the problem. And he talked about doing, he does 2 layers, but his underpaintings are in color.
Yeah.
But, he's like, suck it up and do another layer.
Yeah.
And I had talked to people who'd done underpaintings before, and I thought, well, let's try that. And, that it does solve that problem because you've already got a dark layer down where the dark paints are going to go.
Yeah.
Light. And as I started doing paintings that way, I realized that it was helping me solve a lot of problems in a much easier way than painting straight in color, especially with something like this where I've got, how many different sources of reference material
Sure.
and made up stuff, lighting that makes sense in some places and not in others. Figuring that stuff out in color for me is really hard.
Yeah.
I know there are artists that can do it. But for me, it's so much easier to work out lighting and make changes and push things back and forth in value in black and white because I don't have to worry about screwing the colors up. You can't blend lighter flesh tones into darker ones and have them make sense because they're different colors.
Yeah.
But I can do that in black and white, so I can push everything around really quickly and really easily.
Yeah.
Completely work out the composition, the value scheme, make sure the gestures are working, make sure the facial expressions are working.
Yeah.
And if I do want to change anything, hopefully I've worked it out in the drawing. But if I haven't, or there's some things you can't tell if they're going to work in the drawing.
Yeah.
You can't tell till it's on the.
Right.
I catch stuff all the time in the underpainting.
Yeah.
And then, weirdly enough,
So do you
I've
think
found
that kind of slows you down, allows you to concentrate, because technically it's a little bit more simplified. It allows you to concentrate more on how effectively you are pulling this narrative out.
It allows me to work out all the bugs and
Yeah.
figure out if stuff's working. And ironic is the wrong word, but counterintuitively enough, in a lot of cases, especially with the figures and with things like drapery and landscape for sure, it ends up speeding me up in the long run, even though it seems like I'm painting everything twice. But when I come back and paint the color, I don't have to think about the overall value scheme, the overall composition, because I've already done that work.
Yeah, interesting.
And I can really just focus on how does the color increase the effect?
Yeah.
How does it increase the impact?
Right.
Do these colors work together? Things like that. I feel like I've taken a 4-dimensional problem and broken it up into 2-dimensional problems.
Yeah.
So
That makes a lot of sense.
That's the reason I do that. I don't know if I'm objective or not, but I feel like it's increased the quality of the finished paintings.
Yeah.
Or at least it's helped me solve some of the problems that I knew that I had.
Yeah.
It's introduced some new ones too, but I'll figure out a way to solve those eventually.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's just impressive to me, the scale that you work. There's not very many people doing narrative painting. I mean, of course, I'm in a kind of a small world of art. The art I love, the artists I know, it's not, I think I know a lot of artists, but I'm still pretty limited. But most of the artists that I know and revere aren't, typically doing multi-figure. They're not typically doing narrative. And so you're one of the very few that's even tackling those subjects and doing it large scale, right? I remember being a student at Florence Academy, and that was kind of my idea. I wanted to come out and do more narrative work. I still don't know that I've really kind of tipped those scales or into full narrative. I'm doing some figures in the landscape, a few multi-figure. I've done some religious work on commission, but I feel like I'm still trying to learn how to go into it with a clear narrative rather than just take a model out and pick a cool pose and have her in a nice setting and in an interesting dress. And, I want to be a little bit more purposeful in having a clear narrative and in mind before going out and trying to put this thing together. But it's hard. It gets more and more complex.
Fair, what you're describing is how probably 75% of my work kind of starts that way.
Yeah.
It starts with a photo shoot with models in a particular setting, lighting that I like, and just looking for poses that I like.
Yeah.
In the back of my head, I generally have some certain sort of thing in mind.
Yeah.
And then same thing, you sort through them all, find the ones that work. And then a lot of times what happens with me is I'll look at those poses and then see if any interesting, what can I do to make this interesting?
Yeah.
What can I add to this to make, to add a little bit of lately I feel like it's about, it's kind of weird how I ended up in this weird little niche that right now I'm so in love with, of these. I almost describe it as Bouguereau from the future.
Yeah.
where I love Bouguereau's work, but thematically, other than the fact that it's stunningly beautiful and so perfectly painted, the subjects to me were always a little boring.
Yeah.
And I always kind of thought, wouldn't it be more interesting if you painted with that amount of skill, but something that was a little unexpected,
Yeah,
a little more.
sure.
Anyway, so for the longest time, I was just doing paintings. It would have been this exact painting that's on the easel over here, but without the rocket or anything else.
Yeah,
It would have been pretty, a little bit sentimental, and I really would have been. At that point, I had my head down in those weeds we were talking about, and I was really just trying to paint something that technically was good over and over again.
Yeah.
And was very fortunate to have a gallery and clients that were buying them too, so that I could spend the time to do it. Anyway,
that's a big part.
It's a big part.
Making things happen is patronage, which is what I think I've had thousands of conversations with artists, collectors, galleries, how to build patronage, how you really need the Medicis to have the Renaissance. You really need that financial support. I remember Micah Christensen, who we had on the podcast, I don't know, a long time ago, but the first time I met him, that was our whole conversation was, he's like, where's the Michelangelos? Where are the, Da Vinci's? And I was like, they're there. They are there. It's not like today we don't have a genius like they used to. We just don't have the Medici support.
Well, the trick is you've got to find them.
Yeah.
And I think the mistake that can be made is going out and saying, okay, what do people want to see?
Yeah.
That's what leads to just doing the same thing over and over again. So what happened is, it might have even been you and Jordan Sokol.
Yeah.
I can't remember. I remember seeing on either Instagram or Facebook somewhere a couple of guys that had gone out and were doing a bunch of they'd go out and do plein air painting together.
Yeah.
And it looked like so much fun to me. And I thought, man, I need more artist friends that I can go out and do some plein air painting with.
Yeah.
Problem is, I suck at plein air painting. I've never done it before. So I thought, okay, what I'm going to do this summer in between big paintings, I'm going to practice my plein air painting.
Yeah.
So I took a bunch of landscape photos, and I in between I'd set up my little easel and find a picture and start painting it. And I did 9 or 10 of them, was starting to get a little more confident with it, but I was also starting to get a little bored with it. And I started dropping these little rockets in the background. Yeah. And I got a kick out of it, but I also thought it was really silly. Here's what surprised me on Where Are the Medicis? I posted a few of these.
Yeah.
And there's this weird little subset of the population that somehow had their Venn diagram is like mine, where nature and science fiction and a little bit of a sense of humor and a love of art all kind of intersect in one place. I never would have realized it never would have occurred to me to look for that. But I posted that, and this certain group of people just went nuts for it.
Right.
And not only was it cool to sell it, I have never felt so, I don't even know. It was almost a giddy feeling, just being able to geek out over this
Yeah.
weird little thing that I thought was so beautiful and interesting and fun
Yeah.
with another group of people. And my wife said, she called it, oh, these people are in your tribe. They're
right,
the weird, we like rockets and hiking through nature at the same time.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Anyway, I did a bunch of those, partly because I had nothing else to work on, and partly because I was kind of caught up in this high of, over that summer, I must have done 30 of them.
Yeah.
Every one of them sold, which was awesome.
Yeah.
But what it did was it opened my eyes to the fact that, okay, there's this weird little quirky thing that I love. There are other people that love this.
Yeah.
So I was in the drawing phase. I'd done exactly what we were talking about. I had a bunch of poses that I was working through that, I had my favorites. I had drawn, my daughters had modeled for it. I had drawn the figures. That part was done. I was trying to figure out what to put in the background. And the gallery director was like, you've been posting these drawings online. I have a client who kind of likes this one.
Yeah.
What are you going to put in the background? And almost on a whim and sort of half joking, I was like, well, here's what I would put in the background if it was just for my house.
Yeah.
And I sent her one of those little rocketscapes.
Yeah.
And she wrote back in about an hour later, and she's like, he loves this. You should totally do it. And part of me is really nervous about doing this because I'm talking about, okay, I'm about to invest 100 hours of my time in making this painting. Is this way too crazy an idea to spend 100 hours? But I did it.
That's the fearlessness.
That's amazing. Not only did he love it, I loved it in a way that I've almost never felt about one of my own paintings before, which was kind of a revelation to me in a way. It's like, not only is this about getting a connection from the client, but I just created an image of something that I've never seen before that I would love to see. And after that, that's how I've never looked back from that, honestly. I feel like I've wandered into, and I don't know how it will evolve in the future, but it made me stop and think, okay, what was it about that juxtaposition of having this rocket inexplicably in the background and these two little girls reading a book in the foreground? What was it about that spoke to me? Is it just that it's silly, or is there something more? And the more I thought about it, the more I thought, no, what this is it's almost nostalgia for the future. It's this weird optimism about the fact that the future doesn't have to be dystopian. It can be beautiful. It can be everything we think was idyllic about the past and everything we think would be,
it's almost like how Norman Rockwell painted Americana. You're painting future Americana. You're painting sort of a future society and in a very positive way that is almost childlike in its imagination. It's almost like this sort of childlike purity of daydreaming and imagination and
I feel like it's how people used to feel about the future. And sure, there's a little bit of naivety there, but it's not all naivety. People are capable of amazing things and of solving incredible problems, and I find that beautiful. And that's where the whole Bouguereau from the future. I thought, okay, so what if I were just a naturalist painter painting the beauty around me? I just happened to be from 200 years from now. And then the other thing I kind of realized is that the rockets to me had become, they weren't really rockets. They were just sort of symbolic of aspiration, of optimism, of wanting to go see what's over the next hill and around the next corner. So this human, drive to explore and to not be okay with the status quo and always want to find something new.
It's almost a pioneer-like curiosity.
And I found that really satisfied something in myself. And I think for the first time, I really kind of felt fulfilled by my own work in a way that I hadn't before. And it kind of came out of nowhere. I don't know how you would describe how to find that, other than that, like you said, you kind of have to take a little bit of a chance. And you kind of have to
you're confronting that fear. You had like, I don't know, do I invest in this? Is this going to be a big waste of time? Is this blah 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 blah? But the spark was plein air painting, boring, interesting. You had this again, this sort of beautiful natural willingness to just do whatever in this fearless way, and people responded to that. This is the Van Gogh idea. This is the purity of creative exploration and a willingness to just do something.
And the responses were amazing to me.
Yeah.
And especially the ones that were, I bought this for my daughter's room.
Yeah.
Because I want her to feel this way about the future. Or I put this on the wall in my office so that when I'm in the middle of my drudging day, I can look at that and go, oh, this is kind of what I'm working toward. Yeah. And I felt like that made it worth it almost in more of a way than being able to sell a painting was concerned. But I think it also took being able to look at the things that kind of evoke an emotional response from me and figure out why. What is it? Why do I like that?
Right.
What is it that makes this combination of things pleasing to me?
Yeah.
And then being able to trust that, well, if I feel that way about it, maybe someone else does too. Because I'll be completely honest. You can't, if you're going to be a professional artist, yes, what you paint has to be genuine, but it also has to be something that a collector somewhere will connect with. Yeah. Whether it's one collector buying your original or 5,000 collectors buying a print or whatever it takes. If you can't complain, nobody gets my art. Yeah. Because
it's interesting.
No one owes you anything, no one owes you appreciation of your art.
I think about this all the time. I think about it with musicians. I think about it with filmmakers, with authors, with painters, because I'm kind of going through this a little bit. A lot of people like my invented landscapes. I love them. They seem to thank you. They seem to sell well. They're very easy and you don't have to think much about them. Just pretty. But I think that my main motivation the last few years has really been connecting the figure to the landscape, and I haven't had much interest in it yet. Mm-hmm. And so there's some discouragement in is what I like just weird and unique enough where there just isn't really an audience. I know like there's some musicians I love that haven't quite broke through, but they always have kind of a cult following. But I think they're some of the most brilliant artists, brave artists that are really doing unique things. And I wonder with a lot of creative people, like what would it take? How long can you go without the recognition you were hoping for before you completely break down and say, I just can't do it anymore with your personal stuff? I'm not near that point of discouragement yet, and so I just keep building up this body of figures in the landscape that, I finish, sit against the wall and think, I'm going to have a really nice one-man show here and a few more paintings. Mm-hmm. And I'll just take that around and see if there's a gallery that wants to take that one-man show. But it's the most, for me, the most pure thing that I'm painting at the moment. And I'm just absolutely determined to do it with or without that support. If it never comes, I'm still so satisfied doing it. And I'll pay the bills with the landscapes, which I'm also satisfied doing. Right. I really like doing that, and I challenge myself with new ideas. But I think that it does take a lot to stick in that mindset and be willing and just determined and stubborn and do it with or without immediate success. There's so many people in the world. There will be a group that responds to the things that you
this is my feeling
that you respond to.
As long as you're okay, as long as you don't have unrealistic expectations of becoming like the most famous painter in the world. It depends on what your definition of success is, I suppose. But if your definition of success is creating art that you personally feel moved by, creating something that you think is beautiful and important, and you find just enough people that connect with it, that you're able to keep doing it. Right. to me, that feels like success as an artist.
Yeah, absolutely.
A cult following is enough.
It's enough. And I think that because ultimately we're trying to communicate and we're trying to really, we've talked about this, share who we are and share what we love and give people the same sort of sense of awe and wonder and appreciation that we feel when we view other artworks. If we could do that for one or two people, what a brilliant life we've lived, right? I mean, I can't. I used to work at Discover Card in collections, and
Guys,
hi.
I'm so sorry, but we're not getting hungry. We're getting drunk.
Okay, our wives are. How long have we been talking?
Quite a while.
Quite a while. Yeah, we have. Okay, our wives.
We're having fun.
We're almost done.
All right.
Our wives are not getting hungry. They're getting drunk. That's what they said. I can't remember what I was saying.
You're talking about sharing a sense of wonder and things.
Yeah, I used to work at Discover Card, and what a mindless, awful thing that was for me, because I was always dreaming about painting. I was always dreaming about drawing while I was there, and it just, I was making money and I was whatever, but it just was so unfulfilling. And for anyone who works at Discover Card that loves it, that's fine too. I'm talking very on a personal level. It's so satisfying to fulfill your own vision, to come up with your own vision, to have a goal, and to do it with or without massive support, with or without massive success or fame or fortune or whatever. If all I did was, I find zero joy in selling paintings. I find I love when people respond to them. I love when people appreciate them. I love seeing it on their wall and hearing, how they feel about it or how it makes them feel. Of course, I love that. But the money is I don't really care. It's so not a motivator. But
I love that it means I don't have to build cabinets again.
Sure. Yeah,
so
absolutely.
To me, that's
it
every time someone buys a painting, I feel so amazingly lucky.
Yeah.
To be able to make a living and to put food on the table.
It's satisfying paying bills
by doing something that I would want to do anyway.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
In that respect, I love selling.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
But I think that just living a creative life and especially for me, the opportunity, this was really the big motivator behind doing the podcast is I just feel so lucky to have friends that do the same thing, that inspire me, that have similar stories, that have dedicated their lives to that creative living. And the conversations I've gotten to have, every time I come out of it, I think, why didn't I press record? Why didn't I want to share that with people? It's just it's amazing to be able to interact with other artists, and we're very lucky to be doing what we do. So I guess we should go save our wives and get some food in them so they don't stumble around the rest of the night. Thank you so much for letting us.
Man, this has been so much
come
fun.
in. Yeah,
it makes it clear to me that I need to talk to my fellow artists more often.
Yeah,
I have a tendency, like a lot of artists, to just become a total hermit and never,
well, hopefully as more people get vaccinated and whatever, we can start getting out more, traveling more. I hope to do this a lot more with a lot more artists. So, thanks so much for letting me come in and
anytime.
Yeah, looking at your work a little bit more.
Yeah.
All right.
Great.
That's it.
Thanks, Ryan.
Cool. Yeah, that's good.
I could go for another hour.
I know, me too.
I love talking about
I
this stuff.
I wasn't paying attention to the time at all. That's funny. Okay, postscript. I just want to make sure I forgot to do this. I want to make sure that everybody knows where to find Bryan's work, how to get in touch with him, how to follow him on Instagram. So what's your Instagram?
Bryan Larsen Fine Art. As long as you spell my name right, Bryan with a Y, Larsen with an E,
okay.
You'll find it.
Bryan Larsen Fine Art is your Instagram, and then that would also be your website, I would imagine.
BryanLarsen.com.
Okay, BryanLarsen.com.
My wife does the website design, and she's pretty good at, tickling the algorithms in the right way. So as long as you spell my name right, Bryan with a
Yeah,
Y,
there it is.
Larsen with an E, you'll find it
And
for sure.
and you're showing with Quint Cordair.
Quint Cordair Fine Art.
Fine Art and where is that?
They're in Napa, California now, and they just opened a new gallery in Jackson Hole, which is gorgeous. It's more my speed.
That's interesting because I was selling in a gallery, not to prolong this anymore, but in Jackson Hole, and when 2008 hit, I mean, they were kind of priding themselves in doing, showing a lot of various range of subject matters, and then Jackson Hole almost completely went Western after 2008. So I'd love to see your stuff up there.
Yeah, it'll
really
be
cool.
interesting to see how it works out. Napa is a great location, but it's been tricky. They had an earthquake and forest fires, and COVID has been particularly hard in California.
Yeah.
And I know they've been wanting to branch out for a while, but I'm excited for them. This is, I mean, it's brand new. They're still sanding floors and painting walls, and
and Jackson Hole's coming into their season, so that'll be great timing.
Yeah.
And Elon Musk, we'll tag him. We want to make sure he reaches out to you to start getting some SpaceX things done.
I would love that.
All right. Thanks.
All right. Thanks, Ryan.